Detective Carl Benton wasn't just a cop. He was the law in Silver Creek. At least that's how he acted. He walked like a man who'd never heard the word no. Every step echoed with entitlement. Every glare from behind his aviators reminded people, I'm in charge here. Carl had been with the department for 17 years, and he knew how to get things done. He didn't ask questions, he gave orders. And nobody, not even the mayor, dared question him. But Carl had one problem, one weakness, control, and he hated losing it. That's why when a young woman named Elise Warren refused to back down during a traffic stop, calmly questioning why she was being pulled over, asking for his badge number, something in Carl snapped. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't resist. But her quiet defiance, her unwavering gaze, it rattled him in a way fists never could. You want to act tough, he had said through gritted teeth. We'll see how tough you are in court. Carl wrote her up for obstruction of justice. It was a bogus charge, and he knew it. But the system loved guys like Carl. He expected her to be scared, maybe even cry, apologize, beg. Instead, Elise smiled, just a flicker, and walked away. He didn't know it yet, but that was the moment the game shifted. The courtroom was packed the morning of the hearing. Carl strolled in with his usual swagger, adjusting his tie, nodding at the bailiff like they were old poker buddies. He didn't recognize half the people in the gallery, didn't care. Just another routine day. Just another civilian who'd learn her place. Until she walked in, Elise, wearing a navy blue blazer, hair tied back, calm as ever. She wasn't alone. Sitting beside her was a tall man in a charcoal suit, briefcase in hand. But it wasn't the suit that caught attention. It was the eyes. Sharp, calculating. Military, maybe. Ex-judge, possibly. Whatever he was, Carl didn't like the look of him. Defense is ready, Your Honor, Elise said politely, standing at the defendant's table. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't angry. She was prepared. That's when it started. The unraveling. First, the footage. Elise's attorney pulled out a flash drive. Your Honor, we'd like to submit dash cam footage and security cam angles from the adjacent gas station. Carl shifted in his seat. Gas station? No one said anything about a camera there. The footage played. Silence fell. There was Carl, approaching Elise's vehicle, his hand already on his holster. There was Elise, calm, hands visible, asking for clarification. There was Carl again, raising his voice, not answering her questions, threatening arrest for attitude. And then, the worst part, there was him grabbing her wrist without cause. The judge's brow furrowed. Carl's jaw clenched. This is edited, Carl muttered. No, sir, Elise's lawyer replied. Time-stamped, certified by the owner of the gas station. Uncut. Then came the witnesses. A young father who'd seen the entire stop while pumping gas. A retired teacher who had called the police station afterward to file a complaint and was ignored. And finally, a former patrol officer. Carl recognized him instantly, Officer Damian Holt. They hadn't spoken in over a year. Holt took the stand with steady steps. Detective Benton, he began, has a history of using intimidation during routine stops. I personally filed 2 internal reports during my time on the force. Neither went anywhere. The room fell deathly quiet. Carl's face flushed with a cold red heat. This wasn't a court hearing anymore. It was a reckoning. But Elise wasn't finished. Not yet. As her lawyer rested the defense, Elise asked permission to speak directly. The judge nodded. I was raised to respect the law, she began. But respect goes both ways. The day I was stopped, I wasn't treated as a citizen. I was treated as a problem. Not because I did anything wrong, but because I dared to ask why. She paused. I didn't fight back. I didn't scream. I just watched. Because I knew one day I'd have to tell this story, and now I have. Every word hit like a nail in Carl's coffin. The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowed. Detective Benton, would you like to respond? Carl opened his mouth, then closed it. Because for the first time in his career, he had no script, no allies, no exit. He was found guilty of false reporting and excessive use of force, suspended indefinitely. But the real punishment wasn't legal. It was the silence when he walked into the station the next day to clean out his desk. No more greetings, no nods, just eyes, watching, judging. He had always believed his badge was a shield, but Elise proved it could be stripped away. And for the first time, the man who thought he was untouchable was finally touched by the truth. Carl sat in his car that night, parked just outside the Silver Creek Police Department, hands gripping the steering wheel like it was the last thing anchoring him to reality. The building he once ruled like a king now loomed like a courthouse before judgment. The sun had dipped below the horizon, but the fluorescent lights of the station still glowed, a cruel reminder of what he'd lost. He replayed the courtroom moment again and again in his head. The footage, the witnesses, Elise's calm voice, every detail carved deeper into his pride. He had been humiliated, but worse than that, he had been exposed. He thought about calling in favors, thought about lawyers, union reps, maybe even the chief, but deep down he knew no one was coming to save him. Inside the station, his locker had already been emptied. His badge, cold, metallic, and suddenly meaningless, sat on the counter in a Ziploc bag. Beside it, his service weapon. He took the badge in his hand. 17 years. 17 years of doing things his way. And now it was over because of one woman who didn't flinch. But Elise hadn't just stood up to him. She'd stood up to a whole system. And that's what truly terrified him. If one person could do that, others might follow. Carl wasn't just losing a job. He was watching the beginning of a shift he couldn't control. Elsewhere in town, Elise walked home in the quiet of the evening. She'd turned down every ride offer after court. She wanted this walk, needed it. Each step felt like releasing a breath she'd been holding for far too long. It wasn't just about her case. It never had been. It was about drawing a line, about proving that the uniform doesn't grant the right to bully, to silence, to intimidate. She had seen too many people shrink when faced with authority, herself included once. But that day in court had been about more than justice. It had been about dignity. And maybe, just maybe, it had been about change. 3 weeks later, a quiet update appeared on the courthouse bulletin. Detective Carl Benton, discharged. Official misconduct confirmed. Department to undergo external review. It was a few lines of print, but behind those words, a storm had passed. Silver Creek wasn't fixed overnight. Bad habits ran deep. But people had seen something powerful. A man with a badge brought to his knees not by force, but by truth, persistence, and a woman who refused to stay silent. Elise never bragged, never sought the spotlight. She went back to work at the small legal firm where she interned part-time. She still walked the same streets, but people looked at her differently now. Not with awe, not even with sympathy, but with respect. She had reminded them all that accountability wasn't just a buzzword. It was a responsibility. And sometimes, all it took to start a wave of it was the right woman at the wrong man's court hearing. If you were moved by this story and want to hear more dramatic and powerful stories like this one, don't forget to subscribe to HQ Stories.